Welcome to this video about the Care Act duties on an assessment of need for care and support or support for an unpaid carer. Please note that we have other videos on this topic around the Care Act on the Sky website, along with other resources and a handout with key messages and reflective questions to support embedding the learning. My name is Paula and with me today is June. Hi June.
Hello.
Thank you for your time. In a previous video around an assessment of need for care and support, we explored what this duty was and had a discussion around how we can identify if there is an appearance of need for care and support. So now June and I are going to have a conversation around some of the things that a social care practitioner will need to take into account and consider when they're undertaking an assessment of need. Okay, June, thank you. So when we are thinking about what we need to consider when we're complying with this duty, is that we need to be very clear that an assessment of need is not an assessment of eligibility. The Care Act is very clear that there are three distinct phases and processes, which are the assessment of need, the determination of eligibility, and the care and support plan. And it's not possible for us to undertake a determination of eligibility until the assessment of need has been completed. The assessment of need is to identify the personal and desired outcomes that an individual would like for themselves to achieve on a day-to-day basis. Another important element of consideration when we are working with an individual under an assessment of need intervention is making sure that the assessment is appropriate and proportionate. So as soon as we've identified that there is an appearance of need for care and support and the assessment process has begun, we need to think about what would be the most appropriate and proportionate response to the individual's presenting needs which will be assessed. The decision around appropriate and proportionate should be led by the individual, and so it's important that the social care practitioner provides information and advice to the individual so that they understand the options that are available to them. As with most things related to the Care Act, the approach we take to an assessment of needs is not a one-size-fits-all and should be undertaken in a way which will maximise the individual's involvement in the discussions and the decision-making process. We need to take into account, for example, their preferred style of communication, the length and times of the assessment conversation, and other people that they may wish to be involved. So while it's important that social care practitioner is able to gain a full understanding of the person's circumstances, ensuring that we capture any fluctuation of needs, we don't want to be too intrusive in that person's life. This is why it's important that as early as possible, the social care practitioner or the local authority tries to establish at least a baseline understanding of what is important to that individual, what they're trying to achieve, and then a decision can be made about the appropriate and proportionate assessment moving forward. So June, I've just got a question for you. So what would be important? So let's say that I was going to come and have a conversation with you around what your requirements are to enable you to live a life that matters to you. What would be important for me to consider about you so that I can make sure that I'm giving you every opportunity to be able to prepare for and then have that assessment conversation with me?
Well, I think that you need to have, an understanding of who I am. So that assessment of my requirements would be within the context of my whole identity, if you like. So that would extend to what sort of things I enjoy, what I don't want to do, and who is there already around me to support to do these things. It's really important to do that, that you established a relationship with me. Now, just popping in for 10 minutes to do an assessment before you decide, and I put the emphasis on you deciding, it's not satisfactory. You need to get to know me a little bit, because you can't get to know me wholly. But what is important to me? So establishing a relationship, that working in a relationship-based way is important. Respect me through the whole process. I think it's really important that you don't come with preconceived ideas about what I might need. We are all subject to our own preconceptions, our own views and values and beliefs underpin that. If you think within a sort of framework of service provision and finance, that's not going to be conducive to you listening to what I need. Because actually, I might surprise you and identify something that doesn't cost anything to people who might provide the services. For example, I'm thinking, community support. So if it's about isolation and loneliness, well, there are other ways to do it that is more, I was going to use the word wholesome, because actually it's engaging with other people. And so if you don't come in with those preconceptions and listen to me, then you might find that we're agreeing far more than than we would have thought. So I think that not being defensive on your part, not being defensive on my part, is really important. And in your assessment of need, you might in that relationship you form, you might find that you will find that I'm unique, but you might find that I'm further perhaps on my own empowerment journey than somebody else might be. So the solutions that we come to together might look very different.
You've said some beautiful words there, June, in terms of together, in terms of coming to those solutions together, in terms of respect, and that you're unique, and absolutely an assessment of needs is around drawing out those uniqueness and those qualities that a person has, and using them to enable them to achieve what is important to you. So from what you were saying then, an appropriate way of having an assessment conversation with you would be face to face, where you can sit and have a conversation and feel like you're beginning that relationship with the social care practitioner. Yeah?
Yes.
Okay. That's absolutely fantastic. And for other people, they may prefer to communicate via email or telephone conversation or drop into a local hub. And that is absolutely fine as well. So what we need to be doing is ensuring as social care practitioners that we are listening to the individual for whom the assessment relates to, and that we're doing what we can to maximise that individual's involvement in that discussion and to feel as comfortable as possible moving forward with each other in a relationship, as June so beautifully described it. Okay, so June, I just want you to think about in the past when you've had an assessment, okay, and I know that it hasn't been an assessment of need under the Care Act, but you have experienced an assessment process. What was done in that process to kind of help you, or if anything was done, it might not have been, but to help you feel that it was a conversation, okay, and that the social care practitioner would be gathering information through that conversation to help with deciding what might happen next?
So I think that an assessment happened in my case very briefly, very quickly. Judgments were made, which actually I will challenge all the time, that if somebody was listening to what I thought, if they'd asked me and they were listening to me, they actually responded in a way that didn't take account at all of my views, my words even, and the process of assessment. The decision was made very quickly, and it was quite a well, it was a completely, I was going to say one-sided conversation, but there were actually three people involved, three professionals and myself, and so it was a very, very over one-sided conversation. And within half an hour, I suppose it was decided, if that even time, it was decided that I would have to have a certain course of treatment and how that would happen. And so I would definitely say there was no consideration of the things I've been talking about, not having preconceived ideas, not coming in with almost a service head, what you think I will need, even before you've spoken to me. So for me, there are things that could have been done very, very differently. I will be talking about this in another video in a bit more detail. But I just know the things that I would now say I would want to see happen in any interaction from the first minute you come in my door. So I don't know if you want to talk about the sorts of things I might have wanted to happen.
Yes. So anything really that you think would help you to feel comfortable with that conversation, what that we would need to have to understand what your needs or your requirements are.
Yeah, absolutely. So some of them I've alluded to before, but it is really, really in that situation. See me as the whole person. Come in and see me, talk to me about my life in a holistic way and what relationships I have, what supports I've got. I remember just anecdotally, I have a partner that I love very much, and he was my partner then. And I didn't disclose anything about him, not because I didn't want to, but because nobody asked me. At the end of the at the end of this whole process, a few months later, possibly even more than a few months, but say a few months later, the practitioner disclosed the fact that he'd never taught, he didn't know about a partner, and that my partner then supported me to go in. This is when he first discovered him. When I was trying to get to my records and have a look at those, and practitioner said, "Is he a social worker?" So I said, "No, he's my partner, actually." But that was an important relationship in my life, but all the time there was no knowledge of it. So it's about my relationships, my support. He is and was then very supportive, my partner. That I'm a member of a community, that I have family. No reference was made to my children. Where were they? What was going to happen during this period of treatment, supposedly care, but I was just seen in the context of a diagnosis.
Magnificent things there, and in terms of what our responsibilities are when we're undertaking an assessment of need. And one is to see the individual in the context of their lives and what's important to them, what's important for them, and why. And so I think what I've got from what you have said, June, is that that ability for it to feel like the assessment process, to feel like a conversation, is really important to you, isn't it?
Very much so. Yes.
Yeah.
Without the implications of the potency of the power that the professional is bringing.
Undertaking an assessment of need. I know the things that I'm trying to find is what's important to June. What does she want to achieve? What does she feel like her needs or her requirements are in relation to achieving those things that's important to her? And then what is the impact on her well-being? And I know that's the purpose of the conversation. So I don't take any assessment documents. I go with a pen and a notebook so that I can record what you're saying to me in your own words, because you've chosen those words because they're important to you. And then, going on and just having a free-flowing conversation that you lead. And I help you to lead that conversation through the types of questions that I ask, and give you an opportunity to think about the response you want to share with me in relation to the question that I've asked you.
In part, there are practical things that you need to do to show your respect. You're coming in. It is my house, in my experience it was. It's actually important that you address me how I want to be addressed. I mean, there are some sort of terms of endearment that assessors can use which aren't appropriate. We're often referred to as mum, and I'm not that person's mum, and just really checking how I want to be addressed and to be known as. That's practical. There's all sorts of practicalities like timing and phoning and all of that. But one of the things that I'm quite a stickler about, and I actually do probably annoy a lot of people who come in professional roles, not just in care, who come in to do a job on on the plumbing or something. I always request that they take their shoes off at the door, and whether they have, or if they have any own shoes, which some of the professionals do bring,
Yeah.
And it doesn't seem to faze people now because they got used to your husky.
Yeah.
But to me, that's important. Is it something to do with my identity? I don't know, because maybe coming from the Far East, there is more of a tradition of shoes being left at the door. Well, maybe it's not in my case. That's what's driving me. My OCD, which is my condition, diagnosis.
And absolutely fantastic, because all of those things that you've just explained there are the things that a social care practitioner needs to understand, so that we can make sure the assessment of need is appropriate and proportionate. Because the reason that is, they're really important principles under the Care Act, is because then that means that we're doing what we can to support the individual to feel as comfortable as possible, having discussions with us about things that are very personal and intimate in their lives, about acknowledging areas where perhaps things aren't working quite how they would like. So if it is a matter of taking my shoes off before I come into your living room, then I need to do that, because I need to be supporting you to be as involved in the assessment conversation as possible. Fantastic, thank you. So thank you for listening. Remember to check further resources and other videos on this and other themes around the Care Act on the Sky website. Thank you for your time, June.
Welcome.